Today we're going to talk a little bit about using attribute data. So the first thing that we can do with it is we can sort attribute data, and it really doesn't have any effect on the original data set. It just gives us different ways of looking at the data. You can sort it ascending or descending, and there's other options and things that we can use as well, such as down at the bottom you'll notice the little blue and gray box just to the right of where it says US states. That allows us to see all the data or just the data that's selected. So how do we select things? Well, one of the easiest ways is to go select by attributes, which you can do from the little table menu in the top left corner of the attribute table, and then it opens up a GUI, a graphic user interface, where you can tell it what you want to do. For example, select a method like create a new selection, and there's other options on that drop down, so you have to be careful about that. And then you can select the field, like for example population 2000, and then if you're looking for some particular value, you could hit equals or greater than or equal to and get unique values that will populate all the actual options that exist in the data table, so you don't have to worry about incorrectly typing something. And then you select that. All the while this is going to be filling in that bottom box, which is where you could type it in if you're a SQL typing junkie, and then ultimately hit apply, and it will run the query. Now once it does, it'll select the things that you're looking for. And like I mentioned a few slides back, you see that there's a couple boxes there on the left. It's inside the red circle, and the ones on the right inside the red circle. These show both all and the selected features. On the left, the attribute table, if you select the left of those two little icons, you see all the data, and the data that is selected is in blue. On the image on the right, when we've selected the other of those two little icons, now you only see the data that's blue, the data that we selected based on our query. Now, from the table window, after you've done this, you can click that little icon in the red circle or the clear selection text right below, and that clears your selected features. From the main menu at the top of the screen, you can go to selection and go down to clear selected features as well. There's different types of fields and different types of data in ArcGIS. This becomes more of a problem. I apologize for the yawning. This becomes more of a problem when we look at creating new fields or doing calculations. And so the basic sort of things that you need to really pay attention to are the field types: short, long, float, double. And then if it's a text field or a date or some other format. Now here's where we run into problems. Say we select short integer. Your values can be between 32,000 plus or minus. So if you're looking at values that exceed 32,000 in either direction, short integer is not going to work. Long integer is plus or minus 2.14 billion. That kind of takes care of for big numbers. Floating point basically follows a scientific notation format where you have a mantissa, which is the first part of the scientific notation, followed by your exponent and the power. In a floating point, you have 8 significant digits. If you need more precision, you go to double, which allows you 16 significant digits. And then of course text is text. But just remember, you can't do calculations on text. So if you want to add a field, you can go to that attribute table and go down to add a field, and it pops up. You give the field a name. Remember not to start those with a number. And then you select the type. You can also adjust the length and some other things as well. Adding multiple fields is probably easier in catalog, and allows you to set it up, but the exercises and prices textbook will help you learn more about this. Editing and calculating fields is another important thing we do when using attribute data. First thing you always have to do is make sure that you have your extensions turned on for editing and your edit toolbar turned on as well. And then you're going to make sure that the toolbar is open, and then you're going to start editing by clicking on editor and then start editing. This will allow you to type into the attribute table and make direct changes if you need to. When you're done making changes, you can save your edits or you can stop editing. If you stop editing, it'll ask if you want to save your edits, and you can say yes. If you save your edits but don't stop editing, it allows you to continue editing. Calculating fields. A lot of times you just got to add a new field before you do a calculation. You need to think about what you're trying to calculate, whether you need decimals or not. That'll tell you whether it needs to be a floating point or whether it needs to be short or long integer. Basically, when you go to field calculator, it's going to open up another GUI, another graphic user interface. It's going to allow you to then tell it what that field is actually supposed to have in it. So here is a picture of said GUI we were talking about, and when you right click the field to calculate, usually it's empty, but not always. Just be careful because calculations can't be undone unless you're in an edit session. So if you do field calculations outside of an edit session, which it will let you do, there is no undo function for that. So for example, if we wanted to calculate the percent Hispanic population, we could take the number of Hispanics and divide it by the total population and multiply it by 100. And that's what you see in the window there in SQL. But again, you wouldn't have to type any of this in. You could go through the various types of scripting boxes up there and select the fields that you want, the functions that you need to do the things that you need to do. Geometry is also important. Now, in a geodatabase, certain geometry measures are automatically created and maintained, and they're the ones that appear at the end of the table, and they are called shape_area and shape_length. Now, here's the important thing to remember. Only in a feature class or a feature in a geodatabase are those two fields automatically updated. If those fields at the end of the table are not called shape_area and shape_length, they're not updated. If we're not talking about a feature, if we're talking about a shapefile, those two are not updated. If we're talking about storing this information or this file anywhere other than a geodatabase, they're not updated. Also, when you do a calculation, it gives you units based on the coordinate system that you're dealing with. So if you try to do geometric calculations on a geographic coordinate system, you will get units that are in angular degrees, which are completely useless for most anything that you would want to try to do. So, in short, if you don't know for sure that the area and length calculations are correct, run the tools to update the geometry and make sure that they are. So shapefiles don't create or maintain anything. Sort of what I said on the slide before. You need to make sure that things are in the right area, or things are in the right location, that they're in the right units, and that they're understandable and that they're correct. So best way to do that is to update the calculations. When in doubt, update the calculations. When you think you're okay, update the calculations. When you're almost certain you're okay, update the calculations. Assume all area and length and perimeter type measurements are incorrect until you know otherwise. So be careful, and here's why. You make a modification to a data set, for example, you use an overlay function, you cut some parts out, the overlay function splits some polygons up, and we're talking about a shapefile. The area length and perimeter fields will not be updated, and so when you cut a polygon in half, that those two polygons will now both have the total size of the original. When you combine stuff together, it's going to take one of the measures, not all of them, so it's not going to add it up. When you project data and it basically creates things to be a little bit differently, the lengths of roads and the sizes of polygons are going to be changed. So just always assume these things are wrong. Now, how do we do it? I've said it a couple times about calculating the geometry, calculating the geometry, calculating the geometry. Basically, you right click on the field where that area or length or perimeter or whatever that geometric field is, and then you're going to right click and go down to calculate geometry, which pops up another GUI where you select the property, the coordinate system, and the units. When you click OK, it then populates that field with the data as you instructed. So you can do this to sort of test where you're at. Field named area, always have the correct area? No. Field named area in Geodatabase will always have the correct area? No. How to join or relate tables. Text gets a little bit confusing about this because they talk about joins and they talk about destinations and this sort of stuff, and it can get confusing. For me, I try to keep it simple. I start out with where I want my data to end up. Okay, so if you're trying to attach road data to a county, or no, let's make that the other way around. Say you're trying to attach county data to city parks. Yeah. So you got a layer of data for like parks across the state, and you want to attach all the associated county information with each of those parks. So you start out with the parks, because that's where you want to add the data to. And so you go there, you right click, and you have options for like joins and relates. If you select joins, it opens up a GUI. It asks you what you want to join from, whether it's a table or another data set or what have you. You select the fields, fill out the boxes, tell it what to keep or not to keep, validate it, click OK, and it does the join. And the best thing about joins are they're temporary.